When I was 15, that's the first time I flew. There was a guy lived next door to us that owned an airplane. And so he was barnstorming in 1936. And he asked me, or asked my mother, and would she let me go up with him for 10 minutes or so, and it cost $5, which was a heck of a sum of money. So my mother gave him the money, and away I went, and I flew in this open cockpit type airplane for about 12 minutes. And from then on, I was hooked. So I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So when the war started, of course I was too young.
And it was a fair sailing. The ocean wasn't too rough until we arrived at Ireland. They announced on a loudspeaker that there was 2 submarines after us, and we were going to speed up and zigzag, and it wouldn't be very comfortable. But then one of the Wrens got hysterical about it, and as soon as the ship would shimmy on a crossing wave, she would start to yell, "We're hit, we're hit." And it was getting the whole dorm agitated. And they took her away and put her in sick bay. And then we calmed down, and of course, we had to go to bed with our gray coats and shoes at the foot of our bed, ready to get in them if something did happen.
And then I made my first trip on the 1st of October, 1942, that I'll never forget and should never have been attempted. When I first looked at it, I thought, my God, they're going to slaughter us. We sent 25 Halifaxes from our station and 25 from a sister station close by. There was 26 got back, and the rest of them were shot down. Everybody killed. Well, it scared me to death the first time, because no man can fight those with a set-up place like that, with a whole bunch of machine guns trained at you, and one coming at a time. No, sir.
And I remember vividly the first trip to Paris, because it was Paris. I wasn't bombing in the middle of Paris. I was just bombing the railroad yards. So I don't have any trouble with my conscience. And there wasn't that tendency to feel sorry for somebody down there anyway, because it was war and somebody was trying to kill me. So I was trying to stay alive. They were beginning to know that they had to get rid of those railroad yards if they'd ever get the Germans out of France, because they were very strongly entrenched. And of course, at that time, the railroads were cars.
Carriages, yeah, the cars.
They're full of Jews,
Right.
Women and children, going off to concentration camp. And we were trying to get rid of the railroads as fast as we could.
Then we were sent to a operational training unit, and I went to a place called Gaydon, which was near Stratford-on-Avon. So we crewed up there, And while I was there, D-Day happened. So we were part of a deception plan for the night of D-Day. All the regular main force of bombers were bombing in behind the beaches and the beaches themselves. But the German radar were looking towards England, so they decided they would send 2 more decoy forces. One of them was all the twin-engine Wellingtons at the OTUs, and also the 4-engine conversion units up north, Halifaxes and Lancasters, the training aircraft, no bombs. So when the 3 groups, the main force and the 2 decoys, were heading for France, the German radar would pick them up, and they had to split their night fighter force, and that cut down on the number of fighters. You couldn't tell from the radar which was which. So I flew on the night of D-Day. We just got to the coast. We saw all it looked like there was 2 lines of fire. Our guys firing and the Germans firing back all along the coast, and then we turned around and came back to our base as fast as we could. We didn't hang around.
Canadian troops were the first to break through when they invaded at Juno Beach.
Right.
And that was my target that night. So I can say that I took part in and it was, they reported it being quite successful. It must have been, because we knocked out enough of the gun emplacements around the little village of La Police, or whatever it was, that they were able to break through, the first troops to make a landing. After we finished and we were leaving, and was starting to get daylight, or you could see quite well, and my mid-upper gunner got all excited. Look at all those boats down there. All the invasion fleet. The ocean was covered with boats approaching the coast.
They put up a tremendous amount of flak. And that is, they call it flak because it isn't only air, it isn't only shells, but the shells were loaded with scrap metal of all sorts, jagged pieces. And when the bomb went off, that just went flying through the air and would go right through an aircraft, in one side and out the other. It filled the air with that. And we got one that disabled their plane, and it couldn't fly very far. And so we had to make the decision that it's either you hit the silk or die, and you may anyway. But the only help is to get down on the ground safely. We all didn't by any means, but I did. Lived in a plowed field. It wasn't long before I was picked up because they were out looking. And so I spent 2 years, 3 months and 10 days at a guest of that maniac.
But now, as we flew along, suddenly there was an explosion, and I was a mid-upper gunner, and I looked out of my turret, and there was the starboard wing on fire. and the sheets of flame were coming right back along the fuselage past the rear turret. The pilot gave the order to bail out right away, and the rear gunner exited from his turret. He just turned his guns into the flames and bailed out on the port side. But my exit area was the entrance door. So I had to get out of the turret and get rid of my oxygen mask and my electric suit cord and intercom, and take a big breath of oxygen and start crawling down towards the exit door. Just as I started to crawl, the tail started to come up and the nose was starting to go down. We were going into a dive. So that was a very traumatic situation. My mother's and my father's face came up, and my brother, and I could see them very plainly in front of my face, and I knew I wasn't going to make it. So I don't know. It was just seconds are happening here, and then there was a heck of an explosion, and it blew the complete tail right off. So right where I was kneeling was nothing but air, and I was sucked out. Luckily, I had put my parachute on. I snapped that on, and so I was falling to the ground, and I was unconscious. So I could see these white spots, and then I saw stars, and I realized I was tumbling. And the white spots were snow on the ground. And then I realized I hadn't pulled my ripcord yet. So I saw it had come out of the pouch, and I grabbed it and gave it a yank, and the chute opened immediately, and then seconds later I hit the ground. But I fell in the snowbank. Okay. And there was a lot of snow on the ground and in 1945. So that cushioned my fall. And I lost my flying boot on my right foot, so I had to walk around with a slipper on in the snowbank. And then the farmer came in, and he was surprised, but I said, Canadian, and he said, he says, Canada, he said Englander first, and I said, no, Canadian, and he said, Canada is good. I always remember that. Canadians are good.
The first mission was in March, and my last mission was in the middle of August, when we bombed the German troops right in front of the Canadians. Some of the bombs hit the Canadians, by the way. Not my bombs, but the other squadron that was on. We were in the first wave over this target, Folly Gap, right. And that's when the Canadian troops got bombed. Friendly fire, but that's war.
The end of the war, everybody went crazy. The noise, the church bells were ringing. There was such a hustle everywhere. People were so happy.
That was a war to end all wars. I guess it was more of a starter than anything.
We arrived in Korea and joined a British brigade. Britain had two Commonwealth brigades there at the time, and the culmination of that spring was the Battle of Cap Yong. The Chinese mounted a massive attack to retake the capital, Seoul. One attack was in the west, and the other was on the central front. And as it would happen, the other British brigade and our brigade were astride the two routes that the Chinese armies took. On the west, as you may recall, the Gloucesters were almost wiped out in their stand, but they killed enough and wounded enough Chinese that they didn't advance any farther. In our case, we had a blocking position on the Cap Yong Valley. The Australians, who were more experienced than we were given what was really not a very good defensive position. We had a good position, high and rocky. The Australians were forced to fall back, and then the attack came on us. But the chap that really saved the day for us, the Chinese effort was to break through our perimeter of defense and then get behind us. And they picked on one isolated platoon commanded by a chap named Levy. Now, as it was, he was the most experienced junior officer we had. When the Chinese concentrated on his position, he put his platoon to ground and called on the New Zealand artillery for continuous fire right in front of his position. And for over an hour, he exposed himself directing that fire and broke up every assault that was mounted. Saved the day.
Well, obviously the ones that died, you know, if you're close to somebody, like my crew, and you live with them daily, and you know, go on parties with them and you fly with them in danger, and everybody is depending on the other guy in the crew, and you suddenly lose them. I think that throughout the Army, Navy, Air Force, thousands and thousands died, you know, in all these wars. So that's the bad, you know, you still have the memories all these years.
War's a terrible thing. It doesn't solve anything. That's why right now we could get involved any time with the kind of people we got in the world. And we can't seem to stop fighting with each other.
Well, I think you have to remember that there'll be people like this, I think, in the years ahead. I think this is going to repeat itself someplace else.
As we were driving down a road, I noticed looked out the window and seen a 3-story building. And there was only the one wall up. And how it stood there, I don't know, but it seemed to be there for quite a while. And on the top floor, flying out of a broken window, was a lace curtain. And it sort of made me realize the damage that the war caused. When I seen that, it seemed such a lonely thing, just flying in the wind 3 stories up. It's a thing that I'll remember to the day I die.
Well, I think Canada has been one of the leading countries when it comes to equality and equal opportunity, I think we can be very proud of our country from that point of view. I think we've been, in many ways, an example for others.
I think in most Canadians who are of military age, sort of a sense of responsibility. That's what I was thinking about. There's a war on in World War II. We answered the call. If we don't throw our weight behind the war effort, obviously the Germans and the Nazis, they're going to take over. So we did our bit there.
I think the fact that being in the service and moving around so much and meeting so many different people gives you a good gauge on just what Canada is, especially in comparison to the rest of the world. I think from all the people I've met, Canada is looked on, even by those people who have never been here, as an ideal country to live in. One of the reasons so many want to come here.